much, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on the session today. We've got about 45 minutes where we'll run through a number of different areas of value stream management in the BFSI sector, and we'll get into some of the challenges, some of the pitfalls, and how we start making this transition from DevSecOps to value stream management. I guess before we get into the current status quo, let's take a little look backwards. Let's go back actually over a decade at this point. There's a famous quote that you've probably all heard of software eating the world from Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, and I think one of the key parts of the quote from way back in August 2011 wasn't just that software is eating the world. I think we could all pretty much see that happening back at the time, although the rate of software eating the world has certainly progressed over the last maybe 5 or 6 years. I think one of the key pieces of that quote that is often missed is that software is also eating much of the value chain of industries that are widely viewed as primarily existing in the physical world. What does that mean? Well, if we take software and the benefits of software to the next logical level, where does the software get applied? Where does it get implemented? And how does it affect the banking financial services sector? How does it apply to the world as a whole? And I think when we look at that transition, when we see the shift that's happened, let's take the banking sector as a great example. 20 years ago at this point, if I wanted to pay a check into my bank, I'd need to, well, firstly fly back to the UK, and then I'd need to take my physical check and I'd need to deposit it either via an ATM, if there was an ATM available, or going into the branch and deposit the check. And then after 3 or 4 days, actually it was the UK, so probably 5 days, that money would become available in my bank account. The world has shifted. The world has shifted dramatically. Software has enabled the financial services sector to interact more closely with their end users, their consumers. The user experience that consumers expect from the financial services sector, again, I'm focusing on banking, but this is all areas of the financial services sector and the insurance sectors. People expect real-time interaction. People expect the realities of day-to-day interaction and user experience to be, I have a check in my hand, I can take a photograph of it on my phone, I can deposit it into my account, I expect those funds to be available next to immediately, I expect to be able to draw against those funds as soon as possible. Why? Because that paper is a promise of money. And as long as I'm holding that paper and I'm having that promise of money, I should be able to access it. The physical world has shifted. We've reduced the number of, going back to our banking example, the number of branches. Why? Because we don't need that physical interaction. We've reduced the number of bookstores. Why? Because we don't need the physical number of bookstores to be able to shift and ship books across the planet. Let's not talk about that big vendor who does things like that. We've shifted the interaction with the physical world. What else have we seen? Well, in the last 10 years, there's been a big shift. There's been a big shift from the world of waterfall and traditional development methodologies. We've seen the big shift of not just the methodology approach, but the big shift in the tooling and the people and the culture approach. We've seen a shift from that traditional waterfall to agile development practices to DevSecOps practices. Again, specifically in the BFSI sector, we've seen the adoption of DevSecOps practices with embedded security being a key constituent of how we develop products and applications. We've shifted cultures, we've adopted lean practices, we've adopted more and more automation. 5, 6, 10 years ago, when DevOps was in its infancy, we would talk about automation as though it was some kind of process nirvana. We were looking to automate the repeatability of our deployments. Remember those days when we did a release and it was a big bang event? We had hundreds or thousands of people participating in the process. We had hundreds of testing individuals taking place for performance and penetration testing. We had hundreds of functional testers. We had hundreds of developers providing builds on a weekly basis. We had a big bang release process that involved dozens or hundreds of people. In fact, a couple of organizations that I work with still have pretty substantial release processes. You had those time windows for delivering releases. What did we do? We tried to automate that process as much as possible. Automate the interaction of the human, and the release process, taking away the risks of human failure. What else do we do? We've seen the ability to measure more and more of our activities around end-to-end DevOps processes. And we've seen an increase in sharing information, sharing organizational information, sharing process information, sharing team-to-team information through collaboration. So we've seen the notion of DevSecOps. We've seen changes in culture of lean, of automation, of measurement and sharing, which is leading us towards the next 10 years of DevSecOps. As we get more into a world of true collaboration, more of an understanding between business and IT, more of an understanding within the business areas, more of an understanding within the IT organizations of what changes are driving significant organizational benefit. Whoa, what do I mean by that? Not all change is created equal. If I'm working with one of my customers and we're talking about change and the process of change, what I've seen in the last 5 years is a huge uptake, a huge surge in the number of changes being requested by the business side of the organization. They've been told that IT can now develop and deliver applications or products more quickly, so they would like more change to be delivered. But what we haven't really looked at is what is the value of the change that the business organizations are asking us to deliver. Just because I can deliver 100 changes a week doesn't mean that I need to deliver 100 changes a week to drive significant business differentiation between my competitors and myself, or to drive market advantage. What else have we seen? Well, we're seeing not just the collaboration between business and IT needing to be improved and within the business and within the IT organization, but the alignment of business and IT, making sure that we can prioritize the right changes, making sure that we can track the changes that we need to drive the biggest business benefit through our end-to-end process. We've seen a changing technology approach. We've seen organizations move from, firstly, the monolithic application types through to the microservice types of application. We've also seen a shift from organizations using multiple disparate tools as part of a delivery process to single standardized platforms to deliver applications and products much more seamlessly, which allows us to streamline the end-to-end process. So where are we going with DevSecOps? Well, this whole notion of CALMs, the culture, the lean, the measurement, the sharing. As we look at this CALMs model, we're starting to see a transition into CATs. Well, CATs are taking over the internet. They have done for the last 20 years, but CATs driving DevSecOps, collaboration, alignment, technology, and streamlining, driving differentiation for organizations as they implement DevSecOps. How does that tie into value stream management? And what on earth have CATs got to do with value stream management? Well, I think what we know is that for organizations at the enterprise scale, organizations in the financial services sector and insurance sector, we've seen a lot of shift in the last 10 years. Well, we've just talked about that. We've seen that increase of velocity demand. We've seen a need to work with increased software complexity. We also can see that enterprise software has reached this crossroads. We can continue working the way we were, implementing more agile practices, implementing more CI/CD execution processes, working on strategic alignment and goals. But I guess one of the big challenges that we now need to face is how do we tie together all these different capabilities and components of the solution that we're starting to see? This increase of velocity demand, how do we deliver faster with higher quality, with lower spend and lower organizational budget? How do we align the business and IT execution to make sure we're delivering and focusing on the strategic value changes? How do we make sure that as we talk about the whole notion of software process and tool change, we're actually able to deliver through those disparate, disconnected tool chains? And how do we deal with the complexity that we've introduced by adding components like microservices to our architectures? In the old days, it was pretty simple. If I go back to a mainframe environment from the 60s, 70s, 80s, even the early 90s, it was pretty straightforward. I had a single monolithic application running on a single monolithic server. My connectivity would be through a green screen. user experience was fairly minimal, but I was able to deal with change to that application from one location. If I think about a modern software application, modern software product, I could have 50 or 100 microservices providing components of that application, providing integrated API-oriented architectures for those different APIs and those different microservices to communicate with each other. Those microservice-based applications need to work with our mainframe applications. They need to work with our middleware applications, our three-tier application structures that we've built out. So how do we deal with that increased software complexity? Well, all of these challenges are starting to drive some different thinking, some forward-thinking approaches to dealing with the challenges of software delivery, of product delivery, of end-to-end customer value-based delivery. For example, if I'm thinking about delivering through a value stream or delivering through a product pipeline, what are my critical paths? Where do I go? How do I start at the beginning and get to the end? Where do I go to identify how much value I have? How do I understand what my resource capacity is to deliver the changes that the business is asking me to implement? How do I make sure that the changes that I'm focusing on actually align with the strategic goals of my organization? One of the big challenges that I've seen quite frequently in the last 5 or 6 years, as we've gone through this DevSecOps transformation with customers, is the focus for change and the focus for high value change hasn't reflected in the changes that are being implemented by IT. What do I mean by that? Business may come up with some great ideas. Let's say they come up with 5 fantastic market-changing ideas a year. How many of those changes actually get implemented in the way that the business designed, using the technology that the business expected, and delivering the value that the business promised? And there's a big caveat in that, the value that the business promised. If I've got product managers, if I've got business analysts, I've got folks from my customer-facing team telling me that these changes that we can implement will drive a massive market benefit, when does that ever get tracked? And how do we track it? How do we ensure that these great ideas actually align with the strategic goals of our company? Well, if our strategic goals of our company are to show growth, maybe we're showing growth. If our strategic goals of our company are to show growth in a positive cash flow manner with significant EBITDA growth and a huge level of profitability, maybe they're not being reflected by our value goals and our objectives of those changes. So how do we tie together all of these different areas? How do we pull together all of these changes across multiple tool chains? Because for enterprise customers, we don't have a single technology that delivers a change from beginning to end. As much as we would all love to be a startup organization where you've got a very, very simplistic change process where, hey, guess what? We've got a change process that goes through the same tool from soup to nuts, from concept to cash, from idea to delivery. The reality is, for enterprise organizations, we have a plethora of different tools. We have a multitude of tools, of technologies, of processes, all implemented across different product lines and different product groups. How do we consolidate those across those different tool chains? How are we making sure that the changes we deliver are actually delivering return on investment? And how do we make sure that we're not introducing significant extra risk by every change that we make? What do I mean by making or introducing extra risk? Change is inherently risky. We know that. Why? Because we've worked in the IT industry for decades. We know that every single change that we make introduces potential risk to our organization. There's not a single change that we can make to a production system that doesn't include some element of risk. The more changes we make, the more risk we're being introduced, or we're introducing to our systems, excuse me. The more risk we introduce, the more likelihood of failure. Failure can be a brand-ending event. Failure can be significant in terms of its impact to an organization. So how do we mitigate that? How do we make sure we're not making changes that we don't need to? Well, all of those questions get addressed by utilizing the concepts of value stream management, or in this case, digital value stream management. Excuse me. When we talk value stream management, a lot of folks tend to think of value stream management from the manufacturing and the automotive sectors. The Toyota production system as an execution component of things like value stream management. When we talk digital value stream management, we're talking about value stream management from an IT operations perspective, making sure that our efficiencies from our IT operations side, making sure that our application delivery processes, making sure that our strategic goals and objectives are all aligned and delivering product value in the right way. It's not just Micro Focus who are talking about things like value stream management. There's a lot of information out there in the marketplace. A report that was published recently mentioned that by 2024, 60% of organizations will be using value stream management to improve the flow in their DevOps pipelines, leading to faster delivery of customer value. That's focusing on the execution component, using value stream management to improve the flow of your DevOps pipeline. But there are bigger pictures when we talk about value stream management. It's not just the execution, the DevOps pipeline part, it's making sure we're working on the right changes from the outset and making sure those changes deliver the value that we expect once they get to production, which leads into the whole notion of value stream management. When we think about this whole digital value stream management component, we're trying to enable organizations to track, to analyze, and predict not just the flow of information as it goes through our end-to-end systems, but resourcing requirements, risk identification, waste processes, and the value of change that we'll be delivering. When we're talking about the value of change, what we're really trying to address is business outcome. The higher the value of change that I can deliver, the better my business outcome will be. So when we talk about high value business change, when we talk about predicting value streams, when we talk about looking at machine learning and AI, which we'll talk about in a couple of seconds time, when we talk about those concepts, applying those to change and applying those to the impact of change is really important. Let's think about how value stream management actually flows from a process perspective. Very, very rudimental process. Let's think about the way we expect information, data, process, and change, specifically change, to flow. We'll have a driver for business, maybe the strategic business objective and goal, and we'll have the notion of business value, the business value that we want to be delivering. When we talk about this notion of business drivers, every change that we have should have some kind of weighted or scored value that represents the value to the business of that change. That could be a business objective and key report, or an OKR. It could be an epic, it could be a feature, it could be a story, some kind of implementable component. That value and that change is going to flow from the idea or the concept through every one of our different domains that we go on our way to production. In fact, to the right of release deployment, I've simplified this diagram for now, but over here is all of our IT operations systems. And as part of all of this creation phase, where we're doing design, coding, test validation, there's security that's inherent and built into our processes. Let's keep this flow diagram simple for the time being. We're taking our feature, we're taking our highest value features as defined per product into our execution systems, and we're tracking the flow of that work as it gets delivered. Now, in a simple world, it's pretty straightforward. We would go through our individual phases, we'd go through coding, testing, deploy, release, and out of the door. And in an ideal world, it's going to be, hey, 57 days. But then when we get to the realities of the world, it's a little different. As everyone on the call is aware, things never quite go to plan. We might start off with our great high value business objective and start working through the process, but realize that as we're going through, we have significant rework that we have to do. Maybe the specifications were wrong, maybe our OKRs and our epics weren't properly aligned, maybe the implementation of our epic to our features weren't done correctly. Maybe we needed to revisit the work that we've done as we talk more to our end consumers, our end customers. rework gets introduced, wait time gets introduced. Let's take a great example that most folks are aware of, especially in the DevSecOps space. If we're going from our definition of work to be done from a coding perspective, we work, we build, we deploy to our test environments. We don't quite work as efficiently or as accurately as we should have done. Maybe we fail a test and we need to rework back through our work process. So we'll go through our little iterative loop and we'll change our code, we'll go back, we'll go through again. Every time through this process, we might find rework phases and wait phases, indicative of waste. And that waste or that wait time actually impacts the pace of delivery that we have for our change. Remember, we're not just tracking flow time and waste, we're tracking value of change, and we're talking and tracking all of the interactions between each of our different domains as we're going across every part of our delivery cycle. By applying value stream management, what can we really get to? We can get to the point where we can track things like lead time. We can track how long does it take to go from ideation to value, or from concept to cash, depending upon our value stream, if it's operational or if it's a development value stream. We can talk about throughput, our flow velocity, how quickly can we go, and how can we adjust that flow velocity? Do we add more resources? Do we simplify or reduce wait times? We can track code quality, both in terms of rework, failing of tests, validation of tests, build time, predictive build patterns. We can look at flow efficiency and ROI. We can track value to delivery. And if we promise a value at the beginning and we don't deliver that value at the end, why did we fail? And we can track things like the cycle time, the amount of time that it takes us to go through one of these individual loops. By applying these value stream metrics, what we actually get to is an improved process, almost a lean process improvement approach, using KPIs, using continuous improvement to allow us to track a better route through our process, to allow us to eliminate the waste by validating the requirements from the outset, by making sure they align with our OKRs or our business goals and objectives, making sure our epics are implemented successfully, making sure our stories don't have to go through the same handover process, making sure we're not working and reworking and waiting in the same amount of time, automating as much of our process as possible, automating the delivery of our process, automating the interaction between process, exposing all of this information so we can collaborate more effectively, so we can collaborate and communicate across each of the different elements of our business. This is really focusing more on the execution, the delivery part, but these same value stream principles and practices apply to our IT operations efficiencies, our DevSecOps efficiencies, our end-to-end business and process execution efficiencies. By removing waste, by removing wait time and friction from our processes, we can simplify our outputs and we can reduce our overall time from concept to delivery. One of the key tenets of everything to do with value stream management. What does that allow us to get to? Well, it allows us to gain faster time to market. It allows us to deliver business value more quickly and greater business value by putting the notion of a value proposition against every change, not just tracking flow, but tracking the value of change. We can ensure that we select the right changes and deliver them. And by performing validation of the change delivered, if that change delivered the value that we proposed from the outset, we can then do a gap analysis, a value gap analysis between what we promised we would deliver, what was delivered, and see if our business is actually giving us the right changes to work on, allowing us to refocus our efforts, not just on the changes that the business tells us to identify, but the changes that are most highly valuable to the organization. We can improve our productivity. We can make sure our SDLC processes become predictable. What do I mean by that? If I know that my average flow time is, let's say, 12 days, and I have a blocker as part of my flow process, I can immediately tell that, hey, by where we are in the process, when we complete this activity, our end-to-end SDLC will go from 12 days to 16 days. I've got a 4-day delay. Therefore, my new end time is going to be this. Any application components, any other product components, any other products that are reliant and dependent upon this change will now be impacted. So we can identify risk. We can identify risk to our product and other products that are impacted by this change in our delivery velocity. And of course, we can embed quality as part of our process. We can embed a quality viewpoint across the entire development process, the entire delivery process, the entire product lifecycle, entrenching quality from the outset. And of course, by improving quality, we can reduce risk and we can reduce the need for rework, which is a significant drain on resourcing and costing. The other component that value stream management allows us to get to is integrated compliance. If we integrate compliance, DevSecOps components, if we integrate the validation process, let's say, for example, as we do at Micro Focus, we embed something that we call STAT. Our STAT processes, not just static analysis, but code verification, vulnerability scanning into our development ecosystem, we can ensure that our DevOps tool chains are way more secure, and we improve our lead time because we're not reliant upon later phase performance testing, functional testing, later phase security verification, known vulnerability analysis to identify changes that then need rework. We're shifting left as far as possible as part of our value stream flow. So value stream management, a big shift that we're starting to see in the industry, a big shift that we're starting to see from organizations. I guess before we wrap up, there's quite a few more slides that we'll run through very briefly, but just a quick conversation on value stream management. We've talked about what it is. It's this way to expose value. It's this way to expose flow. It's the way to expose bottlenecks, constraints. It's the way to ensure high value change is delivered as quickly as possible across the entire product lifecycle. But one of the things it isn't is a predefined standard. There's a great question that's just come in that says, it sounds like the scale agile framework. Is this what it's based on? Well, value stream management is actually a component. If you look at the scaled agile framework or the SAFe model, you'll see that there are operational value streams and there are delivery value streams. Those two value stream types align with SAFe quite extensively. However, value stream management can be seen as a superset of SAFe. It sits above both the operational and the deliverable value streams that SAFe talks about. SAFe is a practitioner implementation model, whereas value stream management is more a holistic view of the end-to-end product delivery cycle. It goes beyond the agile world of definition. It goes way beyond that into the world of strategic portfolio organizational view, strategic portfolio execution. It goes to the right of that into IT operations management, into that application performance monitoring space, into the performance verification space, into the help desk systems. It tracks those incident problems and changes as they flow back into the system and perform that closed loop of our value stream. We'll get into a visual on that in a second that might make sure that ties in a little bit as well. But when we talk about value stream management, what it isn't is a predefined standard. SAFe 5 does indeed get into that now as well. Let's keep the SAFe conversation. I'll come back to that in a second as we talk about some of the extensions that we talk with value stream management as well. So value stream management, not a predefined process, doesn't exist as a box that you tick and get a process out of the box. It's not a platform that exists. It's not a single individual that exists in your organization called your value stream management. It's not a project management discipline. It's not value stream mapping where we're trying to expose value and waste and friction points and doing a map of our delivery cycles. What does it tie into? Well, I guess it ties into a couple of different areas. It does tie into, this whole notion of simplifying flow metrics, simplifying value tracking and visibility, tracking that value of change and tracking the execution components. Value stream mapping aligns with the visualization of value stream management. So with a value stream map, what we're doing is we're taking that whole waste diagram that we saw earlier, and we're executing that against every single one of our products and every single one of our product areas. We're able to look at our flow rates, look at our bottlenecks, look at our constraints, remove them using our value stream management maps that we produce, and ensuring that we can simplify that end-to-end flow. When we talk about flow and flow phases, of course, we're trying to reduce the friction that we see from a flow perspective. When we talk about value, we also then need to think about how do we prioritize and track value? Well, if we talk about value in any sensible manner, what we can think of is every different product line that we have within our organization will have a different definition and requirement for value capture. When we think about organizational value, we don't just have a single product in our organization. Well, when I say that, probably 90% of organizations are not just a single product. Most organizations in the banking or finance space have 20, 50, 500 or 1,000 different product lines or applications that they're running. If I think about some of my substantial financial services sector companies, we're talking between 1,000 and 4,000 different applications that run within not just their wealth management businesses, not just their retail businesses, but across all of their different business units. Same with some of my substantial insurance organizations. When I think about some of the larger insurance companies, talking about the US for today, but when I talk about some of the larger insurance companies, you're talking about between 500 and 1,000 different product lines that are currently being developed and supported across multiple business units, across multiple sub-organizations or organizations that have been acquired. So when we talk about value, the value for a change for every different product line that we have will be different. We have some products which are on the upswing of innovation from a product perspective. Net new products that go to market have a very different set of requirements. Net new products going to market might not be initially driven by the whole notion of being able to generate revenue. Yes, that's a long-term goal or objective, but they might be driven by the whole need for something, for example, like market value. How can I drive a new product into market? How much can I drive that product into market and gain market share? Rather than, hey, how much revenue am I going to generate from this product? Revenue generation might be a secondary consideration. In fact, if you think about a lot of the IPOs that have happened in the last 5 or 10 years in the IT sector, what has it been driven by? It's been driven by growth and potential future value, as opposed to being driven by any necessary revenue generation capabilities. Organizations need to show growth rather than revenue in the first instance for a lot of product lines. That's not saying that's all you have to do, but as a simple high-level example. So every different product line that exists within an organization will have products at different levels of their product maturity cycle, which will require different weightings for value. For an old product that's in a state of modernization or is in a state of longevity, it's trying to eke some time out before its end of life, we're probably looking at customer value. How do we ensure longer longevity for that product and additional customer value? For net new products to market, maybe future value, maybe market share weightings are more important. For each of these different types of value, we need to be able to prioritize the value of change per product line, so we're delivering on the right and the most valuable change for those product lines. And like I said, they'll be significantly different. What we then need to do is think about, how do we represent that value? How do we represent value versus risk? How do we represent the value across the board? How do we make sure that we represent, the value across the board? And how do we make sure that as we're representing value across the board, everything is done in a way that is suitable per product line? And how do we then track the delivery of that value in the right way? So we could have a value versus risk matrix, for example. We could have some kind of normalized value for, or normalized scale for value, taking each of those considerations into account. Being able to build out this weighted matrix of value versus risk versus quality is really important to delivering the right changes at the right time for your organization. What else do we see? Well, building our DevSecOps practices are also pretty important. Making sure that we have a consistent language of collaboration between business and IT, making sure that Making sure that we understand the flow metrics. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of the questions that are coming in, and these sound like great questions for the follow-up session, but we'll get into some of these in a second. Making sure that we follow up on the flow metric analysis, understanding how we can track from a DevSecOps perspective, our lead time, cycle time, throughput, work in process, flow efficiency, work profiles, but other important areas like risk of change, value of change, prioritization of change, not just in a WSJF manner from maybe a scaled agile perspective where we're looking at the weighted shortest job first, but high value rating against WJF, and then how we can deliver those epics, those features, and those objectives and key reports, objectives and key results for the organization, our OKRs, as quickly as possible. Ultimately, where do we get to? Well, we get to this whole notion of being able to deliver end-to-end value from ideation to our value proposition, from our concept to our cash, across the business, the IT, and back to the business function, using elements of strategic portfolio management as it ties into the objectives and key results of the organization, tying that into our enterprise architecture, which feeds into our business direction that IT should be aligned with, that feeds into the enterprise agile or the SAFe or the scaled agile framework that allows us to prioritize those high-level epics, understanding the risk, understanding the value of those changes, that feed into our ITSM solutions as they pertain to our production-facing environments, and tracking those changes back to the business to ensure that the value that we proposed from the outset was delivered. Underneath each of these individual domains, our SPM, our EAP, and our ITSM domains, we have the sub-functions that will take place. Underneath strategic portfolio management, we're tracking demand, we're tracking requirements, we're transitioning OKRs, or we're transitioning our business goals and objectives or portfolio plans into epics or some kind of high-level change to be implemented. We're tracking those changes through their breakdown into the versions of the code, the artifacts that we're building and capturing, the deployments that are taking place, the test execution that's happening against those newly built artifacts, the release processes that are shipping those artifacts into our pre-production, our production environments, the installation into production, the instantiation maybe through infrastructure as code onto our cloud-based systems or into our physical or virtual systems, and then our application performance monitoring to track those and ensure if we have any issues raised against that new version of our application that came from our high-level business goal and objective and went all the way through our end-to-end flow, that we can track those and we can ensure that we can identify that change concept and what changed and what was raised as a change from an incident or a problem from our release back into our process. Underpinning all of that, well, I didn't say it was easy. Financial governance, ensuring that we're not spending more than we're generating from an ROI perspective, ensure that our high value changes are not just delivering high business value, but potentially driving financial aspects as well, making sure that our team structures and our financial structures as we do our annual planning can actually be aligned with our product execution levels. Oh, key metrics. Maybe that's a breakout session topic. We'll see what we can get done in the next 5 minutes. Software supply chain governance, another element of this tied into the DevSecOps model. As we're in our version management components, build management, deployment management, how do we ensure that our software supply chain is intact? How do we ensure that the artifacts that we're pulling in as part of our build process have no known vulnerabilities? How do we ensure that when we've deployed artifacts into our environments and into production, if we find an issue, let's take Log4j as a great example of that, where do we have that Log4j component at an earlier version, at a 2.1 version, as opposed to a 2.17 or a 2.22 version, where vulnerabilities have been addressed? How do we ensure that we can identify that through all of the environments that it's being deployed to in our production system, across all of the products that have been run? Because this image applies across multiple dimensions. Think of it as almost an image popping out of the screen. Every product line that we have is one of these images, and it comes out towards you as you have more and more products, and there are interdependencies across these products. How do we then ensure not just the software supply chain and the financial governance of all this, but how do we apply the right AI and ML to understand the impact of cost and risk of change? How do we apply continuous improvements and improvement practices? Ooh, okay. How do we go out? Let's pause for a second. So end-to-end validation, end-to-end flow of information, end-to-end flow of value across the system. got a bunch of questions that we'll pick up in a couple of seconds. One thing I did want to end with, for those of you who may not be aware, Micro Focus as a vendor has our Universe sessions coming up March 22nd, 23rd. We'll be talking all around areas, not just of DevSecOps, not just of IT operations, application delivery management or value stream management, but all aspects of digital transformation. Feel free to join us at that one. You can go ahead and register for that. And of course, there's information that you can find on the social networks, but we've had a number of questions that have come through, dozens of them. So yeah, it's probably now is a good time to pick up some of those, and some can transition across to our roundtable.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Julian. That obviously has stirred some conversation. You know, a lot of, and I had written this down as well. Hopefully you all can join the next session, because I think there's a lot that we need to get to. 45 minutes wasn't long enough. That's very clear. A question that came up a few times, and maybe we can answer that just in case there's people that aren't able to transition to the next session. I had written it down. Looks like Amarpreet Nanda had put this in there, Maria Schwenger, Tanweer. You know, we talked a lot about, you know, the end goal of value stream management. How do you track milestones? Or Amarpreet said it very nicely. What about showing maturity relative to end state? Mm-hmm. How do you gauge whether you're on the right path?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question, and I'll try and be succinct with the answer. No, it's a really important one. So I guess, you know, to have an end goal, you have to start with a known baseline. You have to start with the where are we today, and what are our goals and objectives? Are our goals and objectives to work in a couple of different ways? Are we trying to improve flow rates? So are we simply trying to improve our efficiency across the board? And that's fairly straightforward. We can look at, you know, how long does it take? What's our lead time for a change, for example, and how quickly can we take a change from idea to delivery? Think about it in your environment. If someone came up with the market-changing idea, how quickly could you go from that idea to it being in production and customers getting value from it? And then what are the areas across that entire end-to-end process that you could take waste, or you could take wait times out of it? So that's a very rudimental functional way to start thinking about this. And then for each of the domain areas that we have, we can subdivide. So I used the example of requirements management, code management, test management, build management. For each of those different areas, we can then perform the same set of activities. Where is the waste? Where do we start, and how do we take them away? The second part of that is, how do we deal with value? How do we actually track and validate the value of every change that is going through our process? By applying a value proposition to every change and then scoring that value proposition when it comes out of the other end, you can actually understand if what you're doing is driving true competitive value or differentiation or some form of benefit to the business. And then you can start applying those practices in parallel. There's a load of KPIs, there's a load of metrics, there's things like the DORA metrics, for example, which talk around DevOps transformation and the principles and practices down in the engineering function. Further back up, there are strategic portfolio management goals and objectives. We could talk about in way more detail. Same on the operations side. So pick a domain that you want to focus on, start tracking those flow rates, start tracking those execution rates, and build out from there.
Awesome. Julian, thank you so much for this.